Hello, everyone. Welcome to Say It.
Hey, everyone. So happy you are here with us today. I am Mike.
And I am Sarah.
Mike, quick one for you. Cheese is made from milk.
Right, that sounds completely normal.
Now, a ring is made of gold.
Also completely normal. But wait, why are those two different words, from and of? Milk becoming cheese, gold becoming a ring. Isn't that basically the same idea?
That's exactly the puzzle. One material turning into a finished product. But English reaches for two completely different words depending on the situation.
And I'm guessing that's not even the whole story, is it?
Not even close. There's actually a third word too, with, as in made with. And it does something completely different again.
So made of, made from, and made with. 3 words, 3 different jobs, all built around that exact same core idea.
Exactly. And by the end of today, all 3 are going to make complete sense, starting from the ground up.
Before we begin, please like and subscribe to Say It.
Every new subscriber helps us make more episodes for you.
Let us get into it.
So before we compare made of, made from, and made with as whole phrases, let's slow down and look at each piece separately, starting with the word made itself.
What does made actually mean on its own?
It's the past form of make, and at its core, it simply means something was created or brought into existence. A table was made. A cake was made. A decision was made.
So made is really just saying, this thing exists now, and someone or something created it.
Exactly right. That part stays exactly the same in all 6 phrases we're covering today. What actually changes is the small word that comes right after it.
Which is exactly where of, from, and with come in.
Exactly. So let's look at of, from, and with completely on their own, with no connection to materials at all.
Because once you genuinely understand what each small word means by itself, the whole topic stops feeling like 3 things to memorize.
Fair enough. Let's start with of. Give me a plain example.
The leg of the table.
So the leg and the table are very closely connected, almost like the leg is a piece of the table itself.
Exactly. Here's another. The color of the sky.
Same idea. The color belongs so closely to the sky that they're almost thought of as one single thing.
One more just to really lock this in. The capital of France.
Paris and France tightly connected. You can't really separate the idea of Paris from the idea of it being the capital.
Exactly right. So the pattern across all 3 is the same. Of links 2 things so closely that one almost feels like it belongs to or is a piece of the other.
Now let's look at from. A letter from my mother.
There, from is marking a starting point. The letter began with her. It came out of her and traveled to you.
Here's another. The flight from Paris.
Same idea. Paris is the starting point, and the flight has moved away from it.
One more. A message from an old friend. Again, the friend is the origin. The message started there and reached you afterward.
So from is really about where something began, especially when it's moved or changed since that starting point.
Exactly right. Now, with. A house with a garden.
There, with is describing 2 things existing together, side by side, as part of the same picture.
Exactly. Here's another. A knife with a wooden handle.
Same pattern. The knife and the handle existing together as part of one object.
One more. Coffee with milk.
Two things, sitting alongside each other in the same cup.
Perfect. So, with is really about togetherness, things existing alongside each other, rather than one thing being identified as the other or one thing being the origin of the other.
So now we've genuinely got three separate ideas: closeness for of, origin for from, and togetherness for with.
Exactly right. And here's the big reveal. Made of, made from, and made with are simply these three exact ideas applied to one situation, describing what something is built out of.
Show me how that actually connects.
A ring is made of gold. The ring and the gold are closely identified, just like the leg of the table.
Wine is made from grapes. The grapes were the starting point, but things have genuinely changed since then, just like the flight from Paris.
And a cake is made with flour, sugar, and eggs, several things existing together in the final result, just like coffee with milk.
That's genuinely satisfying. Three phrases that felt random now clearly connect back to three ideas we already understand.
Exactly the point. Now, there are actually 6 words in this whole family, not just 3. So let's map out the complete picture before we go deep on each one.
Go ahead.
Made of, made from, made with. The 3 we just built. Then made out of and made up of, which describes distinct parts forming a whole, not a material at all.
6 words, 6 different jobs. And now we've got a proper foundation to understand every single one of them.
Exactly right.
Let's start with the pair that causes the most confusion: made of and made from.
So now that we've built the foundation, let's put made of and made from side by side properly.
Start with made of.
The table is made of wood.
And exactly as we just built with of, the table and the wood are closely identified. You look at the table and you can still clearly see wood.
Right. Here's another. My house is made of bricks.
Same idea. The bricks are still completely recognizable right there in the finished house.
One more. Her dress is made of silk.
Again, the silk hasn't disappeared or transformed. It's still silk, right there in the dress.
Exactly right. Now let's look at made from. Cheese is made from milk.
And here, following the from pattern we built, milk is the starting point, but it has genuinely changed into something else.
Right. Here's another. Paper is made from trees.
Same idea. The tree was the origin, but you'd never look at a piece of paper and immediately see a tree.
One more. Wine is made from grapes.
Again, grapes were the starting point, but the transformation is real. Wine looks nothing like a grape anymore.
Exactly right. Now, here's the genuinely useful part. A simple test that tells you which one to use almost every time.
What's the test?
Ask yourself, could this be reversed? Could you turn it back into the original material?
Show me with the gold ring from our hook at the start.
Melt the ring down and you're back to plain gold, completely reversible, which is exactly why it's made of gold.
Now the cheese from our hook.
Try turning cheese back into milk. Impossible. The change can't be undone, which is exactly why it's made from milk.
That's such a clean way to settle it. Let's test it on one more pair. A silver spoon.
Melt the spoon and you're back to plain silver. Reversible. Made of silver.
And orange juice.
Try turning juice back into a whole orange. Impossible. Made from oranges.
The test genuinely works every single time so far. Is there ever an exception?
Actually, yes. One honest one worth knowing. Clothing and fabric.
Show me what you mean.
That dress is made of cotton.
But cotton fiber genuinely gets processed and woven into fabric. That's real change, real transformation. Shouldn't that mean made from?
You'd think so based on the test alone. But English still says made of cotton, not made from cotton.
Why does that exception exist?
Because once cotton becomes cotton fabric, that fabric itself becomes the new reference point. It's still called cotton, still recognizable as cotton from that point onward.
So the test applies to the finished named material, not all the way back to the very first raw ingredient.
Exactly right. And here's a genuinely reassuring note if you're a Spanish speaker specifically.
What's that?
Spanish uses one single phrase, hecho de, for both of these ideas. No separate word for the reversible and irreversible versions at all.
So mixing up made of and made from in English isn't carelessness for a Spanish speaker. It's a completely understandable difference between the two languages.
Exactly that. Made of, made from, and the reversibility test. Genuinely one of the most useful tools in this entire episode.
Now let's look at the third word from our hook.
With, and build it into its full phrase. Made with.
And remember, with is all about togetherness, things existing alongside each other, rather than one thing being identified as the other or being its origin.
Exactly right. So, made with names one ingredient or one part among several, not the single defining material.
Show me an example.
This cake is made with flour, sugar, and eggs.
3 separate things sitting alongside each other in the final result, exactly like coffee with milk from section 3.
Exactly. Here's another. The quiche was made with eggs, onions, mushrooms, and cheese.
4 separate ingredients, none of them alone defining what a quiche actually is.
Right. One more. This perfume is made with essential oils of lavender and rose.
Again, several things existing together, contributing to the final product.
Now, here's the genuinely useful contrast worth knowing. Could you technically say a cake is made of flour?
I suppose so loosely. Flour is the main bulk of it.
You could say that, but it's not the natural, complete way to describe a cake. Made with flour, sugar, and eggs is far more accurate because no single one of those ingredients alone defines what a cake fundamentally is.
Right. A table is basically just wood, so made of wood makes complete sense. But a cake isn't basically just flour. It's flour plus sugar plus eggs plus more, all together.
Exactly the distinction. Made of works when one material defines the whole thing. Made with works when several things combine, and none of them alone tells the whole story.
Let's try one more pair to lock that in. These shoes are made with high-quality leather and sturdy rubber soles.
2 separate materials, both genuinely important, neither one telling the complete story on its own, exactly what made with is built for.
Here's a completely different kind of example, away from food and fashion. This smartphone case is made with silicone and a thin layer of metal for extra protection.
Same pattern again. 2 materials, each doing its own job, and neither one alone would describe the whole product properly.
One more connected to something we all use every day. This sunscreen is made with zinc oxide and aloe vera to protect and soothe the skin.
Right. 2 ingredients, each contributing something different, both genuinely necessary to describe what the product actually does.
So made with genuinely shows up everywhere once you start noticing it. food, fashion, technology, skincare.
Exactly right. Now, there's a related family of phrases worth a quick mention too, isn't there?
There is. You'll often hear topped with, served with, filled with, and stuffed with alongside food descriptions.
Show me the difference.
A pizza topped with tomato sauce and mozzarella. That's describing how the dish is finished or presented, not what it's fundamentally made of.
So, those describe the presentation, while made with describes the actual ingredients that build the dish itself.
Exactly right. Made with, several things together, none of them the single defining material.
Now, let's look at a word that sounds almost like made from, but actually carries a completely different feeling. Made out of.
What's the feeling?
It signals that something was created in an unusual, surprising, or clever way, very often connected to reusing something that was originally meant for a completely different purpose.
Show me an example.
The chairs in my garden are made out of old tree stumps.
So somebody took something that was just sitting there, unused, and turned it into furniture. That's genuinely clever.
Exactly right. Here's another. This sculpture is made out of old car parts.
Again, something completely unrelated to art originally, repurposed into something creative.
One more. This pencil holder is made out of my old pencils.
That's a nice one. Old, worn-out pencils given a completely new purpose.
Right. And here's a genuinely useful one worth knowing too. It's made out of recycled plastic bottles.
So this phrase shows up constantly with anything connected to recycling or upcycling.
Exactly. Now here's the clean, practical test worth remembering.
What's the test?
Ask yourself, would this make someone say, "Oh, clever," or "I wouldn't have thought of that"?
Show me how that plays out with a comparison.
Cheese is made from milk. Nobody says, "Oh, clever," about that. It's just the ordinary, expected process.
But the chairs made out of old tree stumps, that genuinely surprises people. It shows real resourcefulness.
Exactly right. If plain made from would undersell how clever or resourceful something is, made out of is very likely the more natural choice.
Let's try one more pair, just to really lock this test in. Curtains turned into children's clothes.
The Von Trapp family children wore clothes that were made out of old curtains.
That's a perfect example. Nobody expects curtains to become clothing, so out of captures exactly how resourceful that choice was.
Exactly right. Made out of. Informal and specifically about creative or resourceful reuse. So here's a genuinely practical question. If you're out shopping and you want to ask or describe a material, which word do you actually reach for first?
I'd guess made of, just based on how often we've used it as the default in our examples.
You'd be exactly right. Let's hear a real, natural shopping exchange to see why.
Go ahead.
I'm looking for a comfortable blue dress that's washable and made of a nice material.
That dress is made of a blend of cotton and polyester. It's a washable fabric.
Notice how naturally made of slots in there, even though we now know cotton and polyester have both genuinely been processed and woven.
Right, connecting straight back to that clothing exception from earlier. Once something becomes a named, finished fabric, made of is the natural, expected choice.
Exactly right. Here's another real everyday example. It's made of a high-quality material that should last a long time.
Again, made of, describing a general, finished material. cotton, wool, leather, metal, anything that stays recognizable in the final product.
Let's try a couple more just to really lock in how automatic this default becomes. Is this jacket made of real leather or a synthetic material?
A completely natural shopping question. And notice made of arrives instinctively there without anyone even pausing to think about it.
Right. Here's one more. This necklace is made of sterling silver, so it should last for years without tarnishing much.
Again, made of, describing a finished, recognizable material. Exactly the shopping default we're building.
So the practical rule is this. For finished, named materials, made of is overwhelmingly the safe, natural default.
And when does made from actually take over instead?
Specifically with food, drink, and paper-type products. Situations where the change from raw ingredient to final product is dramatic and genuinely central to describing the thing properly.
Show me the contrast one more time just to lock it in.
This shirt is made of cotton. That's the shopping default. Natural, expected, correct.
And this juice is made from oranges. There, the transformation itself is the whole point of the sentence.
Exactly right. So if you're ever unsure while shopping or describing an everyday object, made of is almost always your safest bet.
And you switch to made from specifically when the raw material has genuinely, dramatically changed, like grapes into wine or milk into cheese.
Exactly the practical takeaway.
Now let's look at a phrase that seems like a simple variation of made of, but is actually doing something completely different.
So, made up of looks like a small variation of made of, but it's actually doing a completely different job.
What's the real difference?
Made of describes basic material. The thing essentially is that substance. Made up of describes distinct separate parts or members that together form a whole.
Show me a clean pair that makes that obvious.
A chair is made of wood. The chair and the wood are basically the same substance.
And a football team is made up of 11 players.
Right. The players stay separate, distinct people. They haven't merged into one single substance the way wood becomes a chair.
Give me another example of that.
The committee is made up of 10 members.
10 separate, distinct people, each still recognizable as an individual, together forming the whole committee.
Exactly right. One more. This book is made up of photos taken over 30 years.
Each photo is still its own separate thing. They haven't blended into one single image. They're just collected together to form the whole book.
Right. So the test is simple. Are we talking about one substance or separate parts that stay distinct? Substance, made of. Distinct parts, made up of.
Now, there's a related word that sounds a bit more careful, isn't there?
There is. Composed of. It means exactly the same thing as made up of, just sounding a little more formal.
Show me the difference in a real sentence.
Our team is made up of 5 designers and 2 developers. That sounds relaxed every day.
And the committee is composed of representatives from each department. That sounds more careful, more suited to a formal report or announcement.
Exactly right. Both completely correct. It's really just a question of how formal the moment feels.
Now, this actually opens up a genuinely useful pair of verbs too, doesn't it?
It does. Comprise and compose. And there's a really clever trick for remembering how each one works.
Show me.
Comprise puts the whole first, then the parts. The United States comprises 50 states.
And compose puts the parts first, then the whole.
50 states compose the United States.
What's the trick for remembering which is which?
Comprise has 8 letters, and it's used when the bigger thing, the whole, comes first in the sentence. Compose has 7 letters, and it's used when the smaller things, the parts, come first.
The length of the word actually mirrors which end of the sentence carries the bigger idea. That's genuinely clever.
It really is. Now, here's one honest, practical warning worth knowing.
What's that?
You'll hear is comprised of constantly in everyday speech, but major style guides actually reject it as incorrect.
Show me the safer alternative.
Instead of the committee is comprised of 10 members, the safer choices are the committee is made up of 10 members or the committee is composed of 10 members.
So it's worth recognizing is comprised of when you hear it, but leaving it out of your own writing.
Exactly the practical takeaway. Made up of, a completely separate idea from made of, describing distinct parts forming a whole.
Now let's look at a phrase that stretches made of even further into describing a person's actual character.
Everything we've covered so far describes physical things: materials, ingredients, countries, parts. This last phrase stretches made of into something completely different.
What's the phrase?
Made of sterner stuff. It means having a strong, tough character, able to handle hardship better than most people.
Show me an example.
You need to be made of sterner stuff if you want to survive in this industry.
So that's describing someone's inner toughness, not anything physical at all.
Exactly right. Here's another. She's made of sterner stuff than most people I know. Nothing seems to shake her.
Again, describing genuine resilience, someone who handles difficulty better than others around them.
Right. And notice how naturally it connects back to our very first idea from Section 3, of showing that two things are closely identified.
So, a person and their tough character are being described almost as the same thing, the same way a table and wood are closely identified.
Exactly that. Now, this phrase is genuinely old. It actually goes all the way back to Shakespeare.
That's a long history for something we still use in completely ordinary conversation today.
It really is. And it's still very much alive. You'll hear it in sports commentary and in descriptions of tough, resilient leaders.
Give me a modern example.
Something like, the team showed they were made of sterner stuff, fighting back from 3 goals down to win the match.
That's a genuinely satisfying way to end this part of the topic. Made of, stretching all the way from describing a wooden table to describing real human character.
Exactly the point. Made of sterner stuff. Proof that this whole family of words goes further than just physical materials.
Now let's put everything we've covered today into a real conversation.
The scenario. 2 friends shopping together and later chatting about a gift and a work project.
Let us go.
What do you think of this jacket? I'm trying to figure out if it's actually good quality.
Check the label. It says it's made of genuine leather.
That sounds promising. What about this scarf next to it?
This one's made with wool and a small amount of cashmere, so it should be really soft.
Nice. Oh, look at this. A set of candle holders made out of old wine bottles. That's such a clever idea.
Genuinely resourceful. Someone clearly didn't want to just throw those bottles away.
Speaking of gifts, did you find something for your sister's birthday yet?
Actually, yes. I found this handmade necklace at a little shop downtown. Every piece is slightly different since it's all done by hand.
She'll love that, especially since she's always saying she prefers things that feel more personal.
Exactly why I picked it over something mass-produced. How's the new project going at work, by the way?
Pretty well. Our team is made up of 6 people now, after the 2 new hires last month.
That's a good size.
Are you all handling different parts of it?
We are. The whole plan is basically made up of 3 separate phases, and we just finished the first one.
That's real progress. You've been managing a lot lately, honestly.
I have, but I think I'm made of sterner stuff than I used to be. A few years ago, this would have completely overwhelmed me.
You've genuinely grown a lot with how you handle pressure now.
Thanks.
Right. Let us pause there for a moment. How many of today's words showed up naturally in that conversation?
Basically, all of them. Let us pull a few apart.
It's made of genuine leather.
Exactly like real product labels. Made of, for the material,
This one's made with wool and a small amount of cashmere.
made with because 2 materials are combining together, neither one alone defining the whole scarf.
Candle holders made out of old wine bottles.
Made out of exactly because of that clever, resourceful reuse. Nobody expects wine bottles to become candle holders.
This handmade necklace, every piece slightly different.
Handmade, emphasizing that personal, one-of-a-kind quality we built in Section 9.
Our team is made up of 6 people. The plan is made up of 3 phases.
Made up of, twice, distinct people and distinct phases, each staying separate, rather than blending into one single substance.
I'm made of sterner stuff than I used to be.
And there's our figurative stretch. Made of, describing someone's actual character rather than any physical material at all.
Every single word landing exactly where it belonged, because the whole family genuinely makes sense now as one connected system. And that brings us to the end of today's episode.
Of shows closeness, from shows a starting point that's changed, with shows things existing together. Made of, made from, and made with are simply these 3 ideas, applied to materials.
The reversibility test settles most confusion between made of and made from instantly. Can it be turned back into the original? Reversible, made of. Not reversible, made from.
And made with is the one to reach for whenever several ingredients or parts combine, with no single one of them defining the whole thing. Flour, sugar, and eggs making a cake, not just flour alone.
Made out of signals clever, resourceful reuse. Made up of describes distinct parts, not one substance, and composed of is its more formal cousin.
And made of sterner stuff stretches all of this into describing real human character.
Speaking of families of words that connect, if you want to go deeper into quantity words like much, many, and a lot of, we have a full episode on exactly that.
The link is right there in the description. Well worth watching alongside today's episode.
Your challenge? Describe one object using made of or made from, and one dish or product using made with.
Tell us in the comments. We read every single one, and we reply.
Share this with someone learning English and subscribe to Say It if you haven't already.
We will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.